Hello folks, welcome to Canal Channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace a Volkswagen's mechanical fuel pump. For this procedure, it's pretty simple that you can do it yourself without taking it to a shop and spend a lot of money. With that said, let's get started. And as we can see is on our Manx, this is a 1600 cc's, and right here is a fuel pump. This is a mechanical fuel pump. So to replace this fuel pump, we have to disconnect the fuel line coming from the gasoline tank and the one going to the carburetor. So there's two hoses that we need to disconnect. And also there's a 1/2 inch nut on this side, and there's another 1/2 inch nut in the other side. This one you probably can do it with a wrench. That one you're gonna need a swivel head socket. The reason for replacing this fuel pump is right where this pressed, this fuel pump is leaking fuel right in this edge. So that's the reason we're replacing it. One thing you should do, or you can do, is you can remove your distributor cap away from it, so that way it clears this area and you can work on those hoses better, and even on the fuel pump. So with that, we'll remove that, and then don't be careful not to break any internal parts on the distributor. That's just to give you more space on this area. So we're gonna take the distributor cap off. So one thing you're gonna probably experience is that these hoses are gonna be there and stuck to the fittings. So what you wanna do is you wanna twist them so you can pull them away from the fittings. These are brand new hoses, so we probably won't have much problem, as you can see, because they haven't been there for so long. So one thing is that they're gonna be probably stuck to that area. For this, the internal nut that goes towards the carburetor, we're gonna be using a flexible extension with a 1/2 inch socket, and we're using that because there's the distributor, fuel pump, and carburetor all around it. So we're gonna have to feed it like that so we can loosen it, and we're gonna give you a close look how we do that. What you can use on the outer nut, you can use a 1/2 inch wrench, and I have one with a curve, but you can use a straight one. And if you loosen this nut a little bit, you can get the pressure out of the other side. Now you don't have that pressure pulling down here and then pulling the other side. So if you loosen this side, it's like a seesaw. If you get pressure here, it's gonna put pressure on that side. So we take this one off, and then we work on the inner one. Flexible extension with this. Now we can feed it in there, set it, and then we can control more of the angle with that. So because of the fittings, you won't be able to fit in a straight extension. So now we can loosen that nut by using this setup. So now that we have taken off the inner nut, we take this one off. And what we do, once we take that off in the washers, we pull the fuel pump a little bit up to release it from that rod, the push rod. And then we're gonna have to pull it between the carburetor and the belt. So the belt, you're gonna have to pull it away a little bit just to feed the fuel pump out. And now what stays behind is two studs right here, the rod, the push rod, and the gasket. So now we have to replace the push rod as well with the gasket. So here's the old fuel pump. This is actually original Volkswagen, as you can see right there. And this other one is remanufactured, and this is the same shape. So everything's compatible. The way it bolts into the body, onto the motor, the fittings, the inlet, outlet, everything looks the same, but this is the new one. So now we remove the gasket and the rod. So now that you remove the rod and the gasket, we pull this plastic piece out, and as you can see is the guide for the rod. So we got to replace another gasket that is down here, or put another gasket down here. So we remove this plastic and clean down here. The other gasket right down here, we're going to have to clean it. And as you can see, we already put in the knife through it. But you don't want to drop any gaskets or anything in there, because it's the internal of the engine. So now that we have cleaned around where the first gasket goes is this one, and it goes with a hump, big hump away from the distributor. So we put it like that. And then we put our plastic guide on. Then we put the second gasket, which is this. This is on the top between the fuel pump and the spacer. So this is your guide or your spacer, and this is your rod, the push rod for the fuel pump. So that goes right in there, and that's about how much it comes out on each side once it's all installed. So now we put the guide first, once we have put the first gasket in there, and then we put the rod in, our new rod, and then we put the top gasket so we can put the fuel pump on. So now that we have put our guide, we slide our pin or rod in, and then we put our top gasket, and then we start feeding our fuel pump in. Now we put the top gasket on, and then we can put our fuel pump in. We just ran into a little situation where we try to feed the fuel pump in there, and it looks good, right? But it doesn't slide down into the stud, because the reason is that the hole is a little smaller than the stud. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to open that up a little bit more, because the stud doesn't go through, and we're gonna show you a little bit with a regular bolt, it stops. So we're gonna use a round file to open that a little bit more. And you might have to run it, if you run into that situation, you can use just a file to open it and bore it out a little bit, both sides if it's need to, so that way it makes your job easier. So now we're using a round file, we're running through it, we're gonna file it out a little bit, so it makes the bore out a little bit bigger, so then it falls right in there. So now that we have bored it out a little bit and we clean it, we set it again and it slides right in there. So now we can see the bolt coming up all the way through both sides. So what we do now is we put both compression washers on both of them, and we put the nuts, tighten it down, and then start putting the hoses and the distributor back. So now we use our 1/2-inch socket to tighten the inner nut, and then we tighten the outer nut. So the bottom piece or the bottom fitting goes from the fuel pump to the carburetor, and the upper one, the fuel tank to the fuel pump. And so we tighten those clamps. And then once we do that, that should finish the process of replacing the fuel pump on this 1600 engine. And then we just put our distributor cap back on. And well, folks, hopefully this video was useful and helpful and give you an idea how to replace a mechanical fuel pump on a Volkswagen air-cooled engine. And this is a pretty simple procedure you can do at home without getting ripped off at the mechanic shops. And what we did was just getting the fuel pump and taking off the 2 nuts, replacing the fuel pump with new gaskets, and get it back on the road. So with that said, folks, for our friends who are watching our video, haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. If you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here en el canal del Chano José.